Okay, so it's kind of wild, right?
Yeah.
We spend all day, like, tapping on these tiny little pictures.
Right.
And it feels like, like they're this universal language, right?
Right.
But have you ever, like, stopped and thought, hold on, is the thumbs up that I just sent, like, going to be interpreted completely differently by the person on the other side?
Oh, it's a really good point. I mean, I think we do often like operate under the assumption that because they're so visual,
Yeah.
they should be like straightforward across the board.
Yeah.
But much like spoken language, the way that we understand and use these symbols can be like incredibly nuanced. It depends on the context. Have you ever had that moment where you're like, uh-oh, like I'm about to send this emoji
Totally.
and I'm worried that it's going to be misinterpreted
Absolutely.
and it's going to lead to a really awkward like digital moment.
Oh, 100%. Like hovering over the send button, being like, is this like a faux pas?
Yeah.
Am I about to do something really wrong?
Right.
And that is exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Mhm.
So we're unpacking the surprisingly kind of secret meanings that have developed around emojis,
Yeah.
specifically English emojis.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we're going to figure out how you can navigate this often very tricky world without like accidentally stepping on someone's toes.
Yeah.
Or, sending a message that you didn't intend to send at all.
Exactly. And I think the goal of today's deep dive is really to give you the knowledge that you need to avoid those, like, what we might call emoji fails, right? So we'll be exploring the hidden meanings that might lurk behind these, like, seemingly innocent icons.
Yeah.
We'll understand how things like generation and culture play a huge role in how you and others interpret these. And by the end, you should have a, like, really much clearer grasp of what we might consider the secret language of emojis in English.
Okay, I love that. A secret language I'm ready to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it. Why do these seemingly simple images create so much potential for miscommunication? It feels like at their core they should be, universally understood.
Right.
So given that they are visual, why haven't emojis become, truly universal in their meaning?
That's such a good point. And that's like where I think a lot of the confusion stems from, right? Like, while the actual image might look the same across different platforms and devices that you might use, the cultural understanding and the associations that we've like come to attach to them are certainly not universal.
Yeah.
For example, you could take the like eggplant emoji
Oh.
in many English-speaking contexts, particularly in the US.
Right.
It has like taken on a meaning that is quite far removed from its like literal definition as a vegetable.
Right.
And this is often the case with like, internet slang.
Yeah.
Certain objects can become associated with sexual innuendo, sometimes because of like phallic resemblance, other times simply because they're part of this shared, often taboo, online vocabulary.
Right. So the eggplant.
Yeah.
It's not about cooking anymore. When you see that pop up in a message,
Right.
it's something else.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've got that one.
Yeah.
What else is like a really good example of that?
Well, you could also look at something like the okay hand gesture.
Okay.
The one that makes a circle with the
Right.
with your fingers.
Right.
So while that might be like generally positive, indicates agreement in lots of parts of the world,
Right.
including much of the English-speaking world, it's considered highly offensive in Brazil.
What?
So imagine sending that to someone like from Brazil. It's not the message you intended to send, right?
Wow. That is a huge difference.
Yeah.
Like, that is so interesting to me. It really highlights how these, like, seemingly innocuous symbols
Right.
can carry such different weight depending on where someone is from.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've talked about cultural differences, right? But then we also see these fascinating generational gaps in emoji interpretation.
Absolutely. I think generational differences are really important when we think about, emojis and how different age groups
Yeah.
understand them.
Yeah.
And a great example of this is like the face with tears of joy emoji.
Right.
So for a lot of millennials, this might signify, genuine like side-splitting laughter.
Yeah.
But Gen Z often use it to convey like mild amusement or even like sarcasm.
Right.
So like the same emoji can communicate
Wow.
very different levels of emotion depending on who is sending it.
It's really interesting because, you still see millennials using it for like genuine laughter.
Yeah.
So is there like a risk of intergenerational miscommunication,
Totally.
even with like seemingly very obvious emojis.
Yeah, it's like the emoji itself hasn't changed, but it's like emotional register has shifted.
Yeah.
Depending on, the generation using it.
Right.
So fascinating.
It really is fascinating. And then there's like the whole issue of tone too.
Right.
Right. Like even seemingly simple emojis can carry like a lot of different emotional baggage.
Exactly. You could take, for example, like the simple smiley face.
Right.
On the surface, it seems, friendly and playful.
Yeah.
But depending on the context and, the relationship between you and the person you're sending it to, it can also come across as passive-aggressive or even insincere, right? It lacks the enthusiasm of, like, full, like, big grin, like the one with the teeth.
Yeah.
And that subtlety can be interpreted in different ways.
It's like the digital equivalent of a flat tone of voice.
Totally.
You're just left like, what is going on here?
Right. You're wondering what's really being said.
Right.
Yeah.
What about, I also saw something about like the most misunderstood emoji.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one.
Yeah.
The heart on fire.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's actually like really ambiguous in its meaning.
Yeah.
Some people interpret it as like burning love, like really intense passion.
Yeah.
Others read it a lot more literally as like heartburn.
Right.
Or even like as this sort of metaphorical representation of like something ending or being destroyed.
Right.
So, yeah, even seemingly straightforward ones can lead to a lot of confusion.
Okay, so we've established that the emoji landscape is a lot more complex than it appears.
It is, yeah.
So let's talk about some of the like emoji landmines.
Ooh, yes.
The ones you really need to be careful about sending.
Yeah, so these are the ones that, these are the emoji combinations or single emojis that have like developed slang meanings.
Okay.
Or can be easily misconstrued, in potentially negative or inappropriate ways, if used incorrectly.
Okay.
A key example of this would be like pairing the no entry symbol with the peach emoji or the water droplet emoji.
Oh, okay.
So in internet slang,
Right.
this combination is often used to refer to someone's behind.
Right.
So this is definitely something you'd want to avoid.
Right.
Sending, in like a professional or formal context.
Yeah, that is one to steer clear of.
Yes.
Unless you are very sure of your audience.
Oh, right.
Okay. What about the no entry symbol with the eyes?
Oh, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So that combo can actually be interpreted in a couple of ways.
Okay.
In some contexts, it can be seen as like implying something sly or mischievous.
Yeah.
Or even like sexually suggestive, like don't look, but you know what's happening.
Right.
But in other like more innocent contexts, it might just mean don't watch or look away.
Yeah.
So it really depends on the, the conversation and the relationship between you and the other people involved.
Right. Context is key, as always.
Always.
Always. What about, I also saw the no entry symbol with the nail polish emoji.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't like immediately scream danger to me.
Right. So that one has developed this really specific meaning, particularly online. It's often used to like signify gossip or shade. Like implying like, no, I'm not going to get involved in that.
Wrong.
No, I'm not going to acknowledge that.
Okay.
So it's very specific.
Very specific.
Yeah.
And finally, the no entry symbol with the thumbs up.
Oh, yeah. The classic thumbs up.
I mean, I use the thumbs up all the time.
You and me both.
Yeah.
But that particular combination, especially amongst Gen Z, has taken on this meaning of like sarcastic dismissal.
Oh, what?
Like it has a real cool story bro kind of energy to it.
Yeah.
So it's used when someone wants to shut down the conversation or express like their lack of interest or belief in what's being said.
That is so different.
Wild, right?
Yeah.
From its intended use.
Right. So what would you say is like your best advice for us when we're feeling unsure about an emoji?
If it feels risky or you're not entirely sure how it's going to be received, it's always best to just like skip it.
Okay.
Or, if you really want to use it, test it out on a friend first.
Right.
Gauge their interpretation.
Better safe than sorry.
Totally.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Now let's get to some of the like common emojis that you see like all the time, right?
Yeah.
But what are their real intended meanings in English chats?
Yeah.
It feels like sometimes they've like evolved beyond their like original purpose.
They really...
So let's talk about like the crying face, for example.
Yeah, the loudly crying face, right.
Right.
So that one is actually often used to, like, signify extreme laughter,
Well,
like to the point of tears,
right.
rather than actual sadness.
Interesting.
It's like a way of saying, like, something is so funny
Yeah.
that you're crying from laughing.
Right.
So if someone sends that to you after you've, like, told a joke,
Yeah.
chances are they found it funny.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
I was worried that people were actually crying.
No, they're laughing.
Okay, good. Okay, so we got that one. What about the face with the rolling eyes?
Oh, yeah. That one is pretty, I think the interpretation is pretty much what you'd expect.
Yeah.
It's that sense of, like, exasperation or disbelief.
Right.
Like, are you serious right now?
Right.
Like that
Okay.
kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And then what about the eyes, like the shifty eyes?
Oh, yeah. That one actually has a couple of common interpretations. It can mean, like, I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Like you've noticed something.
Right.
Kind of subtle, maybe like a hidden meaning.
Yeah.
It's also often used to, like, be like, spill the tea.
Oh, yeah.
Like, tell me the gossip.
Yeah.
Be like, I'm ready to hear this.
Okay. It's like observation and anticipation.
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. I like it. And what about the skull?
The skull. Okay, so that's another one that, again, it has taken on, like, this more figurative meaning, particularly online and among, like, younger generations.
Right.
So it usually means something like, this is so funny, I'm dead.
Okay.
Again, another, like, form of, like, hyperbolic expression.
Yeah.
Like the crying, laughing face. Like, it's meant to, like, show that you found something really, really amusing.
Okay, good. So not meant literally then,
No.
which is good.
No.
Okay. Good to clarify. And then the grimacing face.
The grimacing face.
Yeah, that one to me has always felt very ambiguous.
Right.
Like I don't really know what that one means.
I think it generally represents, like, awkwardness,
Okay.
or that feeling of unease or nervousness.
Yeah.
It can also convey, like, a forced smile or, like, like you're cringing at something, like
Right.
that kind of, that uncomfortable facial expression.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You also mentioned a listener story earlier
Oh, yeah.
about an emoji fail.
Emoji fail, yes.
I'm intrigued. How did this go wrong?
So we had a listener at Shy Texter, and they wrote into us and recounted this experience of sending the stuck out tongue and winking eye emoji to their crush.
Oh, okay.
And they meant it to be like, playful, like, thanks.
Right.
But the crush interpreted it as flirting,
Oh, no.
which, I mean, I kind of get it,
Yeah.
But it was just meant to be like, thanks.
Oh, that is mortifying, but also, like, totally understandable.
Totally. Yeah. It can happen. It can happen to the best of us.
Yeah, it really highlights that potential for miscommunication, even with what seem like, fairly common emojis.
Yeah, very common, yeah.
Okay, so how do you use emojis like a native speaker and avoid these kinds of pitfalls?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I would say rule number one is, like, less is more.
Okay, right.
Overloading your texts with, like, a ton of emojis can often look spammy or even, like, overwhelming. Like, imagine receiving a text and it's just like, all these random positive emojis like clap, smiley face, like party popper, thumbs up.
All right, yeah.
It can just be like, it's too much.
Yeah.
So
It can come across as insincere, too.
totally.
Like you're trying too hard.
Too much, yeah.
Okay. What about in more professional settings?
Yeah.
Are there any emojis that are, like, generally safer to use?
Yeah. So, for professional texts, I think it's always wise to, like, err on the side of caution.
Okay.
But some emojis can be, like, really useful.
Yeah.
For, like, quick acknowledgments.
Yeah.
For example, a check mark or, like, a thumbs up can be really good for, like, acknowledged to convey that message.
Yeah.
For gratitude, I think the, like, folded hands emoji is a safer option than a heart.
Right.
A heart can sometimes be, like, misconstrued in a professional setting. And then for, like, indicating a good idea, a check mark and a light bulb is a good, like, great idea type message.
Right. Yeah, those are good ways to, like, keep it professional.
Yeah.
But still, like, add a little bit of, like, visual.
Right.
Add a little spice.
Right. Exactly. What about when you're talking to, like, friends?
Oh, yeah.
Like, can you be a bit more, like, adventurous there?
Yes. I mean, with friends, you have, like, a lot more leeway,
Yeah.
right? And you have that understanding of like their emoji language.
Right.
So for example, like, the knife emoji
Okay.
can jokingly mean like, I'll kill you,
Right.
in like a playful, exaggerated way
Yeah,
between close friends.
Yeah.
The nail polish emoji with some sparkles
Okay.
is like, has become shorthand for like, this is iconic.
Right.
Or like something really fabulous,
Yeah. And then the frog face next to a cup of tea is a direct reference to the like, but that's none of my business meme.
Right.
Which, implies like, observing something
Yeah.
without getting involved.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, we've all been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We've all done that. Okay, cool. So you said a pro tip for using emojis like a native speaker.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Especially when talking to friends.
Yeah.
I would say mirror the other person's emoji style.
Okay.
So if they tend to use like a lot of emojis,
Right.
then feel free to like reciprocate
Yeah.
if they're, more sparing in their use.
Yeah.
You might want to like follow suit
Okay.
to avoid like, seeming overenthusiastic or like out of sync
Right.
with their style.
That's so smart. I love that. Okay, so for our listeners who really want to like hone their skills.
Right. Become real like emoji masters.
Emoji masters.
Yeah.
What kind of emoji detective work would you suggest they do this week?
So I have a challenge for you.
Okay, I love a challenge.
Okay, so first, start really looking for like hidden meanings.
Okay.
In the emojis that you see, in texts on social media,
Yeah.
really pay attention to the context.
Okay.
And try and figure out like, what the emojis are really implying
Yeah.
beyond just their like literal representation.
Okay.
Number 2, try testing out one like ambiguous emoji.
Okay.
Maybe one we've discussed today.
Yeah.
Like the shifty eyes or the nail polish emoji
Right.
with a friend and see how they react.
Okay.
That can be really helpful for like,
Real-time feedback.
yeah, real-time feedback.
Yeah.
And then the final one, try and decode.
Okay.
Ask a native English speaker what their favorite emoji means.
Ooh, interesting.
So you might be like really surprised by what you find.
Yep.
For example, if you use like the shifty eyes to like hint at gossip,
Right.
and your friend immediately understands and is like, spill the tea,
Yeah.
then, you've achieved like, hashtag emoji win.
Yeah.
That's what we're aiming for here.
I love that. Hashtag emoji win.
Emoji win, exactly.
Okay, so to kind of like wrap things up here, give people a final takeaway.
Yeah.
What would you say is the key takeaway from this?
I think ultimately emojis are a lot like the body language of texting.
Yeah.
When used correctly, they can add like, tone and emotion and a bit of fun
Right.
to our digital conversations.
Totally.
But just like, misreading someone's facial expression in person,
Okay.
using them incorrectly can lead to awkwardness and misunderstandings.
So golden rule is.
Golden rule is before you hit send, on that text or message,
Yeah.
take a moment and just ask yourself, could this be misread?
Okay.
And if there's even like a slight doubt in your mind,
Yeah.
maybe pick a different emoji or just use your words.
Yeah. So-
Clarify what you mean.
Good advice. Good advice. Okay, so as we become like increasingly reliant on these visual cues in our communication,
Right.
here's a thought for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hit me. Okay.
I'm ready. How might this like increasingly visual nature of our conversations be subtly reshaping our understanding of tone and intent?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's a great question. And it's definitely something to think about as we, continue to like, live in this digital world.
Yeah. And, it goes beyond just like avoiding those like emoji fails.
Totally.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like a bigger question about like how we're communicating.
Absolutely. It's like the evolution of like digital expression, right?
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Fascinating stuff.
It is fascinating stuff. Well, that brings us to the end of our emoji deep dive.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I had a blast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Until next time.
See ya.